Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something huge, something so fundamental. It's basically us. Human dialogue.
That's right.
And we're not just talking small talk here. This is about, what one of our sources calls a foundational technology for humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. Our mission today is to weave together a whole bunch of different research fields, interdisciplinary stuff, to really unpack the science of how we talk to each other. We'll go from how it evolved to how it works day to day, why it breaks down so often, which it does.
Oh, it definitely does.
And most importantly, how we can use all this knowledge, this science, to actually build a better future, communicate better. You should hopefully get some real aha moments about your own chats.
I'm ready for those. So, okay, this idea, dialogue as a biological imperative, a cognitive engine,
Yeah.
that sounds really significant. What does it actually mean for how we see ourselves?
It means basically that talking isn't just a skill we picked up. It's the defining thing about Homo sapiens. It's not a tool. It's like the bedrock technology behind everything else we've done.
Everything, like building societies, inventing things.
Pretty much all of it. And here's the kicker. Dialogue didn't just come after we got smart. The very act of communicating, of dialoguing, actually shaped our brains. It drove our intelligence.
Wow. So it's like a feedback loop.
Exactly. You called it a quantum leap earlier.
Yeah.
Moving from simple animal calls, mostly emotional, limited to our kind of language, open-ended, symbolic, abstract.
Yeah, how did we make that leap? It seems massive.
It was what the sources call a co-evolutionary engine. So picture this. The need for better communication pushes brain development. Then, smarter brains allow for even more complex communication.
Okay, I'm following.
Dialogue itself literally selected for brains that could handle its demands. Think sophisticated imitation, understanding what others are thinking, that's theory of mind, and this thing called syntactic recursion.
Syntactic recursion. Sounds technical. Break that down for us.
Sure. It's basically our ability to embed ideas within ideas. Like, I think that you hope that she knows. See how you can nest those thoughts.
Okay. Like layers.
Exactly. That layering lets us express super complex, abstract thoughts.
Yeah.
Way beyond just danger or food here.
And physically.
Right.
Yeah, what changed in our bodies to make us, speech ready?
Some really specific anatomical shifts. The big one is how our tongue sits lower in the throat compared to other primates. This creates a unique vocal tract shape.
And why does that shape matter?
It allows us to produce these really distinct, stable vowel sounds like I, A, U. They call them quantal sounds. They're easy to distinguish even when spoken quickly.
Huh. Never thought about vowels that way.
Right. And the fossil record suggests this change happened around 50,000 years ago. Crucially, Neanderthals didn't seem to have it. It's a key difference.
Okay, anatomy. What about genes? Is there a talk gene?
Well, not just one. It's more complex. But the gene FOXP2 gets a lot of attention. It's often nicknamed the language gene. It's definitely vital for the brain circuits involved in speech and language.
So mutations in FOXP2 would cause problems.
Serious problems, yeah. Severe speech disorders. And there are other genes, too, like CNTNEP2, involved in brain connections for language. It's like a whole genetic toolkit passed down that primes us for dialogue.
So taking all that in, biology, genetics, we're fundamentally built for dialogue.
Yeah.
What's the flip side? What happens when it breaks down or when we're isolated?
It hits us hard. That deep biological and psychological need isn't being met. Think about how damaging social isolation is for mental health. That's not an accident. It goes against our wiring.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And here's a really powerful point from the sources. Attempts to get rid of other cultures or dehumanize groups, it's not just morally wrong, it's like societal self-harm. It attacks the very cooperative dialogic strategy that made our species successful.
Wow, that reframes things significantly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. History. You mentioned we've always tried to make dialogue more persistent, portable, scalable. How did that journey begin?
It started way back in what you could call the age of symbols and orality. Think about those incredible cave paintings, 30,000 years old or more. They weren't just pretty pictures, they were likely ways to communicate ideas across time.
Like leaving a message for the future.
Exactly. Then you get rock carvings, pictograms. But for thousands and thousands of years, the main way knowledge and culture moved was through spoken word. Stories, songs, epics, all memorized and passed down. Oral tradition was huge.
But memory is fragile, right?
Yeah.
What was the big leap that made dialogue something solid, tangible?
That had to be the revolution of writing. Around the 4th millennium BCE, in places like Sumer in Egypt, Suddenly, complex ideas could be physically recorded, stored, transported, analyzed with real accuracy.
That must have changed everything.
It did. And then the alphabet came along, simplifying writing dramatically. It wasn't just for elite scribes anymore. More people could learn to read and write. It sort of democratized recorded thought.
So, with writing established, how did that allow us to start formally studying dialogue itself?
Good question. That really takes off with the Greeks. Specifically, Plato in the 4th century BCE. He wrote down the Socratic dialogues.
The Socratic method.
Right, the alenkers, that rigorous back-and-forth questioning to test ideas. By writing it down, Plato essentially codified a way of thinking about dialogue as a tool for finding truth.
But wasn't there a tension even then?
Oh, yeah. Plato contrasted his method with the sophists, who were more about using rhetoric to win arguments, to perform. So this tension dialogue for collaborative truth-seeking versus dialogue for competitive, when it's ancient and, still totally relevant today.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So fast forward from ancient Greece. How did we get to the point where we can have, potentially, a global conversation instantly?
It was a series of accelerations. Gutenberg's printing press in the 15th century was massive. Suddenly, texts could be mass-produced.
Fueling things like the Renaissance, the Reformation.
Exactly. Huge shifts. Then boom, boom, boom. Telegraph, telephone, radio, TV, each one shrinking distance and time. And then, of course, the internet and social media just blew the doors off.
But the source mentions a paradox of progress. These amazing tools also create new problems for dialogue. How?
Yeah, it's a paradox. Each step forward introduces new ways for communication to fail. Writing loses all the nonverbal cues, tone, body language.
You can definitely misread an email.
Totally. And social media, with algorithms creating filter bubbles, can actually isolate us in echo chambers, making dialogue across different groups harder. So while we've erased physical distance, we've accidentally created new kinds of psychological and social distance.
That's a critical point.
Which is why the source argues that the science of dialogue has to be a science of its media, too. You can't separate the message from the channel it travels through.
Okay, let's dive into the mechanics then. Are there some universal, macro rules for good communication that always apply?
Yeah, there are some widely accepted principles. Think of them as the basics. Things like effectiveness, does it achieve its goal? Comprehensiveness, is the info all there? Clarity, coherence, timeliness.
Makes sense. Be clear, be complete, be on time.
Right. Plus things like grabbing attention, allowing for feedback, being flexible, authentic, specific, concise, correct, and, just being courteous helps.
Definitely helps. But okay, that's the big picture. What about the nitty-gritty, the micro grammar of just chatting? It feels so spontaneous. Is it really?
Not at all, actually. It just feels that way because we're so good at it. There's a whole field called conversation analysis, CA, that studies this. And it shows ordinary talk is this incredibly organized, self-regulating system.
How so? Give us an example.
Okay, take turn taking. We mostly talk one at a time, right? And we manage those transitions super smoothly, usually at natural endpoints like the end of a sentence. We call those transition relevance places, or TRPs.
So we instinctively know when it's okay to jump in.
Pretty much. We're coordinating constantly. Then there are adjacency pairs. These are like preset sequences. Question, answer, greeting, greeting, offer, acceptance. They're like the basic building blocks.
Okay, I see that.
And because things go wrong, we mishear, we misunderstand, we have repair mechanisms, systematic ways to fix problems. And interestingly, we usually prefer to fix our own mistakes first. Self-repair keeps things flowing better than constantly correcting others.
Right, you try to backtrack yourself before someone else points it out.
Exactly. And underpinning all of this are the nonverbal cues. Your gaze, gestures, posture, tone of voice. They're not just fluff, they're contextualization cues. They signal when you're done talking, add emotional weight, clarify meaning.
By looking away slightly if you want to keep the floor.
Precisely. It's this intricate dance, all happening incredibly fast, mostly unconsciously.
It's amazing when you break it down like that. How do more formal models, maybe even mathematical ones, fit into this picture?
Well, you've got things like Shannon's information theory. That's a mathematical model looking at communication purely as signal transmission. How much information gets through versus how much gets lost to noise.
So less about meaning, more about fidelity.
Exactly. It connects dialogue to physics in a way. Then on the flip side, you have things like dialogic theory in public relations. That brings meaning and relationship back into focus. It stresses things like mutuality, empathy, commitment. and the dialogic loop, which is basically formal feedback in organizations.
So different lenses for different aspects.
Right. The big takeaway is that dialogue is multi-layered. You've got the grammar layer, syntax, the context layer, pragmatics, the meaning layer, semantics, and crucially, the relationship layer. And a message can be perfectly grammatical and clear.
But still fail.
Absolutely. If it damages the underlying relationship, it's failed, no matter how well phrased it was technically.
That's a really important distinction. Now, we often think of dialogue as universal, but the sources stress how embedded it is in culture. What does sociolinguistics tell us here?
Sociolinguistics shows us dialogue is never neutral ground. It always reflects who we are, where we come from socially, culturally. Think about codes and registers.
Meaning how we change the way we talk depending on who we're with.
Exactly. You don't talk to your boss the same way you talk to your toddler, right? Basil Bernstein talked about restricted codes used in close groups with lots of shared understanding versus elaborated codes, which are more explicit, needing less shared context.
Okay.
And then there's interactional sociolinguistics linked to John Gumpers. This looks at those subtle, culture-specific contextualization cues we mentioned, like intonation, rhythm, word choice.
The nonverbal stuff again?
Or even subtle verbal stuff, the way you say something. If people from different backgrounds misread these tiny cues, even if they understand the dictionary meaning of the words, you get major crossed wires. It's a huge source of intercultural misunderstanding.
Wow. So zooming out, how does anthropology see dialogue fitting into the whole picture of culture? Is it like the fabric?
That's a great way to put it. Anthropology views dialogue as the medium through which culture is made, shared, and changed. A key idea here is cultural relativism.
Understanding things in their own context.
Right. You can't judge another culture's practices or communication styles by your own standards if you want to actually understand them. It's vital for meaningful intercultural dialogue. And ethnography, the main method anthropologists use.
This is basically deep immersion and talking to people. Right.
Exactly. Dialogue is the method. It's how you bridge the gap between your own perspective, the self, and the other. Dialogue also builds cultural identity, sharing stories, myths, values. It's how groups define themselves.
So the source even had a formula. Cultural policy depends on dialogue.
Yeah. Cultural policy, F dialogue, stakeholder engagement, community input. Basically saying that good policy emerges from good conversation with everyone involved. Dialogue isn't just part of culture. In many ways, it is culture in action.
Okay, so putting that together, there's no single right way to have a dialogue. And power plays a role, too.
Definitely no single right way. Only culturally embedded dialogues. Think high-context cultures, relying on unspoken understanding, versus low-context ones demanding explicitness. And yes, power is always part of the equation. Critical sociolinguistics specifically examines how language reinforces power structures.
Like whose way of speaking is considered standard or educated.
Precisely. Who gets heard, whose voice carries weight. So any real attempt to improve dialogue has to grapple with these power dynamics. It's inevitably political, not just technical.
Let's switch to the inside view, our own minds. Social psychology apparently shows our intuitions about conversation are often wrong.
Oh, yeah, quite often. We make what they call conversational mistakes and biases. There are errors of commission, saying the wrong thing, and errors of omission, not saying something we should have, like an apology or a compliment.
Okay.
One really interesting finding is the liking gap. We tend to systematically underestimate how much the people we just talked to actually liked us and enjoyed the conversation.
Really? We think it went worse than it did.
Often, yes. And another one is the reticence bias. This is the mistaken idea that speaking less makes you seem more likable or thoughtful.
I could see people thinking that. Don't dominate the conversation.
Right, but studies suggest speaking up, even taking up 50% or more of the time, can actually make people see you as more interesting and likable because they get a better sense of who you are. Our instincts can be off.
So more talking can be better, counterintuitively.
Sometimes, yeah. The underlying drive, the psychological reward we're all seeking is that feeling of connection, that rapport or chemistry when things just click, verbally and non-verbally. That's a powerful motivator.
How deep does this go? Does dialogue actually shape our core beliefs? Maybe even our sense of morality?
The sources suggest it does, profoundly. Take interfaith dialogue. The goal isn't to convert anyone, it's to build mutual understanding and respect. By talking, sharing values, finding common ground, it can genuinely reduce prejudice and conflict.
Okay, on a societal level, what about individually?
Think about moral development in kids. Psychologists like Piaget and Kohlberg showed that children's moral reasoning develops through stages. And what drives that development? Social interaction. Playing together, arguing about rules, discussing moral dilemmas with peers. Dialogue is the engine.
So we literally talk our way into becoming moral beings.
In a very real sense, yes. Our interactions shape our understanding of fairness, justice, empathy.
That's incredible. And the source even connects formal logic, which seems so abstract, back to dialogue. How on earth does that work?
It's a fascinating field called dialogical logic. It reframes logic not as static rules, but as a game of argumentation.
A game.
Yeah. Imagine a proponent trying to prove a statement and an opponent trying to disprove it, following strict rules of attack and defense. The meaning of logical terms like and or not is defined by how you can challenge and defend them in this game.
So A and B is true if you can successfully defend both A and B against challenges.
Essentially, yes. A proposition is considered logically valid if the proponent has a guaranteed winning strategy. They can successfully defend it against any valid attack by the opponent.
Okay. What's the bigger implication of that?
It connects logic directly to rational, ethical argument. The rules of the game are designed for fairness. You can't just make stuff up. You have to defend your claims based on what's already agreed upon. So logical proof becomes a model for how to conduct a fair, reasoned debate. It links logic, maths, and ethics in a really deep way.
Mind blown a little bit there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this amazing capacity rooted in biology, refined through history, complex in its mechanics, yet we're also really good at messing it up. Why will we break the rules? Why do humans try to, as the source put it, get rid of other cultures?
Yeah, it's the tragic paradox. These destructive tendencies often spring from deep psychological roots. Fear, mistrust, feeling powerless, perceiving others as a threat, sheer ignorance. Neuropsychology even shows links between brain areas for fear and those for hate.
Fear leading to hate.
Often. And a key mechanism here is dehumanization. That's when you start seeing an outgroup as less than human. It makes it psychologically easier to mistreat them. You use derogatory language, strip them of empathy.
Which then relates to that paradox of tolerance idea.
Exactly. Karl Popper's idea. A society that values tolerance can't infinitely tolerate intolerance. If it passively allows forces that want to destroy tolerance to operate freely, those forces might eventually win. So protecting tolerance sometimes requires being intolerant of the intolerant. It's a difficult line to walk.
And these individual psychological issues, they get amplified by bigger social forces.
For sure. Think about cultural assimilation. When a dominant group pressures minorities to give up their culture and adopt the mainstream one, that's not just social pressure. The source calls it a fight over dialogic space. It's an attempt to create a monopoly on how legitimate conversation happens, silencing other ways of being and speaking.
And that fuels prejudice and conflict between groups.
Absolutely. The basic human tendency to form in-groups and out-groups gets weaponized. Prejudice provides the justification, and then you see real conflict erupt.
It sounds pretty bleak. If these forces are so strong, how can we possibly push back? How do we mitigate this?
Well, the research actually offers some strong hope here. One of the most powerful tools we have is positive intergroup contact, especially forming actual friendships across group lines.
Just getting people together.
Under the right conditions, yes. Gordon Allport's contact theory is key here. It says if contact happens between groups of roughly equal status, working on common goals with support from authorities, it works. It reduces prejudice.
How? What's the mechanism?
Several things happen. You learn more about the other group, which reduces ignorance. Your anxiety about interacting with them goes down, and you start to develop empathy. You see them as individuals, not just stereotypes.
And friendships are particularly powerful.
Extremely. Because they also lead to normative change. If people in your own group see you have friends in the out-group, their perception of what's normal, what's acceptable, starts to shift. It encourages broader openness.
That's actually quite optimistic.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's zoom back in from big societal conflicts to everyday communication. Why do simple conversations break down? What's the anatomy of communication breakdown?
Oh, there are so many ways. The sources categorize them pretty well. First, you have psychological or personal barriers. Things like not really listening actively, having totally different expectations, ego, defensiveness, being too emotional.
In there.
We all have. Second, semantic barriers. Basically, misunderstanding words. Maybe it's jargon, maybe it's just different backgrounds leading to different interpretations of the same word. Third, technological barriers.
Like the email example again?
Exactly. Digital tools strip up tone, body language, jokes fall flat, sarcasm gets missed, urgency isn't conveyed, big potential for misinterpretation. And fourth, organizational or hierarchical barriers.
Like being afraid to speak up to the boss.
Yeah, or information being deliberately withheld as it moves up or down the chain. Power dynamics interfering with open dialogue. And remember, all of these risks get massively amplified in intercultural situations. Different local rules about eye contact, turn-taking, directness versus indirectness. It's a minefield if you're not careful.
Okay, so if these breakdowns are predictable, like system bugs, can we apply systematic fixes? What are the strategies?
Yes, definitely. The science points to targeted solutions. For those psychological barriers, practice active listening, use I statements instead of blaming "I feel frustrated" versus "you made me angry." Work on creating psychological safety so people feel okay speaking up.
Makes sense? What about the word misunderstandings?
For semantic barriers, avoid unnecessary jargon, define your terms clearly, use simple language, maybe even create a shared glossary for a project team. For cultural barriers, become more mindful of nonverbal cues, do your homework before interacting with different cultures, cultural briefings, explicitly negotiate how you'll communicate, maybe get intercultural training.
And technology.
For technological barriers, be super aware of tone in texts and emails, maybe add emojis or explicit cues. If it's sensitive, switch to a richer medium like a phone call or video call, and set clear guidelines for how your team uses different tools. When is email okay? When do we need a meeting?
So tailored solutions for different types of problems.
Exactly. Address the specific weak point in the communication system.
All right, if we understand the problems and potential solutions, how do we apply this science proactively to build a better future? Let's start with governance and leadership.
The quality of any governing body, a company board, a city council, a national government, hinges on its dialogic processes. When we're electing and developing leaders, we should look beyond just charisma or expertise. Can they foster psychological safety? Are they a dialogic leader who genuinely listens and respects diverse views?
So leadership training should include dialogue skills.
Absolutely. Things like structured leadership dialogues, using facilitators, can be incredibly powerful for getting honest feedback and building alignment. And for shaping public policy, formal policy dialogue processes are key.
Getting stakeholders together to talk.
Yes, but in a structured way. Not just a shouting match, but a process focused on information sharing, joint problem solving, seeking consensus. It's an alternative to political gridlock on complex issues.
And the legal system. Dialogue plays a role there too.
Definitely. Laws often evolve through a kind of societal moral dialogue. Public debates about values eventually shape landmark court decisions. Plus, there's formal judicial dialogue between different courts, even across countries, influencing legal interpretations. And you can even get mathematical about it with strategic dialogue, from game theory analyzing interactions like negotiations to understand rational strategies and likely outcomes.
So it's foundational for institutions. What about closer to home? How is dialogue the lifeblood of families and communities?
It really is. For building families and communities, it starts with creating safe spaces for communication, active listening, empathy, openness. Simple things like family routines, maybe eating dinner together regularly without screens, build trust and connection.
Those small rituals matter.
They really do. And in the wider community, dialogue builds what the source calls civic muscle. That's the capacity for diverse people to actually roll up their sleeves and work together on shared problems. Dialogue is the workout for that muscle.
I like that analogy. And for social cohesion overall.
Crucial. Especially in diverse societies, intercultural dialogue is what weaves people together. It builds relationships, fosters a shared sense of identity, helps people focus on the common good. It's absolutely vital in places recovering from conflict. And of course, dialogue in education.
How should that look in schools?
It means creating a classroom culture where different kinds of talk are valued, rigorous debate, open-ended inquiry, clear instruction. Using dialogue actively helps students develop critical thinking and prepares them for participation in a democratic society.
So when you really boil it down, committing to dialogue is fundamentally an ethical stance, isn't it?
It is. Soros talks about the ethics of dialogue as a relational ethic. It's not just about rules, it's about the quality of the interaction. Key principles are mutuality, being willing to take relational risks, committing to the process, and having what Carl Rogers called unconditional positive regard for the other person.
Valuing them, even when you strongly disagree.
Exactly. And maybe the toughest part, being genuinely willing to be changed by the dialogue. To learn something new, to see your own blind spots, maybe even admit you were wrong. That takes courage, but it's where real understanding happens.
We've covered an incredible amount. Looking forward, how can this science help us tackle the really big global challenges we face?
It provides a framework, Take environmental sustainability. We need effective sustainability dialogue that brings everyone to the table, governments, corporations, scientists, activists, local communities, to co-create solutions for climate change and biodiversity loss.
You can't just be top-down.
No way. Same for food security. Initiatives like the UN's Food Systems Dialogues aim to bring all the different players in the global food system together to figure out how to make it sustainable and equitable. Or the circular economy moving away from waste. That requires global dialogue, like through UNEP, to coordinate a massive shift in how we produce and consume. Dialogue is the mechanism for coordinating that kind of complex change.
And what about AI? The source mentioned AI's role in this too. How does that fit in?
AI is poised to play a few different roles, actually. First, AI as analyst. AI can process and synthesize enormous amounts of information from different fields, like the sources for this deep dive, helping us see the connections.
Okay, as a research tool. What else?
Second, potentially AI as mediator. Imagine AI tools that could participate in human conversations, maybe subtly nudging people towards clearer communication, identifying potential misunderstandings in real time, suggesting ways to bridge gaps.
Wow, like a real-time dialogue coach.
Could be. And third, AI as participant. As we build more sophisticated AI, we need to think about how it engages in dialogue with humans. Designing AI for ethical, empathetic, effective communication is a huge challenge, and understanding human dialogue is the foundation for that. But maybe the single most crucial takeaway from all this research is that this science of dialogue is ultimately a science of systems.
A science of systems.
Meaning human interaction isn't just one thing. It's this complex, nested system, from the biology inside us, to the turns we take in conversation, to the cultural rules we follow, the logic we use, right up to global cooperation. Failures aren't usually isolated incidents. They're system failures.
And understanding it as a system helps us fix it.
Exactly. It gives us a unified way to think about it all. And if we see it as a system, we can be more conscious and deliberate about designing better dialogic systems in our families, our workplaces, our societies, to foster a healthier, more cooperative, and frankly, more prosperous world.
So we've really taken a deep dive today into us, into the core of how we connect and interact.
And remember, getting your head around this architecture of dialogue, from evolution to your chat over coffee, it's not just interesting theory, it's practical. It's a toolkit you can use to navigate disagreements, build stronger relationships, understand the world better.
So the final thought for you, the listener: if dialogue truly is our foundational technology, our core operating system, and if it functions as a complex system, what's your role? What responsibility do you have in consciously designing the future of human cooperation, starting maybe with your very next conversation? What might that look like?
This is DigitView.